It's the single biggest problem that all programmers face. How do you get your project written? You load up your editor, you've got a blank screen, you know in your mind sort of program you want to write. It's hugely complicated. Where do you start? How do you get from nothing to something? This is going to be quite a different sort of video from the sort of videos that I normally do. I normally guide you through particular programming problems or take you through steps in writing a specific project. This is far more general. It applies to all programming projects. It's something that I've really thought about since reading some of the comments on some of the other videos that I've put up, where people really clearly do have problems in trying to decompose a complicated project so that it becomes accessible and can be written in a reasonable time with a reasonable degree of effort. What I want to do is to outline a general approach to programming. Let's take two examples of projects that you might have in your mind. These projects I've actually done myself. You can go to my channel, you can see how I've done them, but I'll try to explain to you how I go from a very complicated project in my mind, the one I want to write, to go back to the basics so I know how I can build it in a series of steps. Two projects to give you an example. One is a program Launchpad. I wrote a program Launchpad for Windows. It's a form and I can drag on files or directories or even web pages out of the File Explorer or my web browser. They create buttons. The buttons have icons on. I click a button, it launches a directory, a file, a document, an executable, or logs onto a website. I can move the buttons around, I can delete them, I can save configurations of all my buttons and load them up and have a recently used file menu. You can tell from my description, it sounds an incredibly complicated project. How did I start? I worked out the two essential things that I need to do. One is I need to create buttons, the other is I need to drag and drop. The first thing I started with, how do I drag out of the File Explorer and find the name of the file, the path to that file? All I was interested in that point was getting a text string just indicating the path to the file, nothing else. Second problem, how do I create a button? So again, that was one single problem. So I've got two isolated problems. Those are the problems I solved. Once I had those two problems solved, I could put them together and use my button to launch the path that I dragged in. So really what I'm saying is I had a very, very complicated end goal, but I worked out what are the simplest possible building blocks to get started. Take another example, completely different project. Again, you can see all my steps that I've taken online. I've got on my channel lots and lots of lessons. You can see this. Writing a text adventure game. Again, very complicated. I've got a map of linked rooms, a player that moves around, picking up treasures, dropping treasures in other rooms, even putting things into boxes, picking up the box and the box contains the treasure, and saving and loading entire games and all the puzzles that go with it, and very, very complicated. An adventure game is a very complicated thing to write. How do you begin? You begin by working out the simplest possible component of that game. What's the simplest component? It's a location. The player has to be in a place, a single place. Call it a room with a name, troll room, and a description. Yeah, it's a big room that smells of troll. That's fine. That's what I begin with. One single room. That room needs exits because eventually it will form a map. So I put in north, south, west and east, and I give those numbers. I think later on in my game, those numbers will indicate some other room. Room number 1, room number 2, room number 3, etc. But in my first step, I don't bother with that. I just want one room. One room that I can display the name and the description of. Once I've got that, I can work out how to add a second room. Once I've done that, I work out how to move from one room to the next. So what I'm really getting at is every complicated program you'd ever write, you need to step back from the complexities and work out what's the simplest possible parts of that program and deal with each problem, one problem at a time. Trying to deal with the whole complexity is just too complicated. It's like an author who writes a whole novel. You've got to take it one chapter at a time, one paragraph at a time, one sentence at a time. Same with programming. Don't try to sit down and write your program from start to finish, all in one go. Work out the tiniest, most important, most fundamental building block. Get that written first, leave the other complexities till later. Anyway, I thought this is worth talking about because this is something that people have commented in a number of comments on threads in my videos, the problems of just getting started on a project and taking it forward. And I know some people are quite overwhelmed when they think about whatever complicated project they want to write. It's the same, whatever it is, whether it's a game, whether it's a utility, whatever you're writing, try and decompose the big problem into a series of small problems and start with one tiny problem at a time. Anyway, I hope this has given you something to think about. As always, so you don't miss any other videos, subscribe and click the bell and you'll be notified whenever I upload something new.